All right, we're going to move on to using semicolons, colons, and commas in lists, which corresponds to C.2 in IXL. Many of you are doing okay on this one, but some of you are having a hard time, so I wanted to make sure that I covered it. This one is a little bit easier to learn, only because there are fewer rules to remember. So we'll get through the rules relatively quickly and then get right to applying it. Why we have this rule is for examples like this one right here. I like wearing my hat, which is green, glasses, and my nice red shoes when I go out. It's very confusing. And the problem is that we have too many commas here. And it makes it hard to understand exactly what's being said or what's being communicated here. So let's start at the basics. Rule number one. I like red, green, and blue. If you're going to have a list of 3 or more things, you use a comma to separate your items. Separate the things you like, for example, here. A really common question is, should you use a comma there between the second and the third, or before the last one? There are 2 schools of thought on it. My advice to you is just to use it. You're more likely to get it wrong by not using it. So in general, use it. And for the purposes of IXL, they'll expect you to use it as well. So you're using commas to separate 3 or more. You do not use commas to separate 2. Right? No need to do a comma there. So for 3 items, you do it. For 4 items, you do it, and on up. But 2, you do not. So use the commas to separate your items here. Now the problem comes when you have items that have a comma within it already. So I like Dallas, Texas, New York, and Tokyo, Japan. Now this could be pretty confusing. I like Dallas, I like Texas, I like New York, I like Tokyo, I like Japan. Now, reading this a few times, you can probably gather that these are the cities and states or countries. But with just the commas there, it's hard to figure out exactly what you're trying to say. Are you saying that you like Dallas and you like Texas? Which New York are you talking about here when you talk about New Yorks? And so this is where rule number 2 comes in. If you have a situation like this, you can make it easier on your reader by adding semicolons between your main items. And you do this when the items themselves have a comma already being used, right? And if we take away the underline here, that probably makes sense. I like Dallas, Texas, New York, and Tokyo, Japan. It just looks a lot cleaner. You can tell that this is item 1, item 2, and item 3. So let's look back up at this example up here at the top. I like wearing my hat, which is green, glasses. Okay, so it's kind of like there. I like wearing my hat, which is green. I like wearing glasses. And I like wearing my nice red shoes when I go out. In other words, this is item 1. Actually, we'll just underline the whole thing here. This is item 2, and this is item 3, right? I like wearing my hat, which is green. I like wearing glasses, and I like wearing my nice red shoes when I go out. And I love this when the autocorrect gets it wrong. Consider revising. I'll do no such thing. So, yeah, we're separating our 3 primary items because the items themselves have a comma in them, inside of them, I'm going to use a semicolon. Okay, so that's rule number 2. Rule number 3, this will be the last one before we go and do some practice, is how to use the colon. So we've gone over semicolon, right? We've gone over commas. Now let's go over the colons. There's a right way and a wrong way to use colons in a list. Here's the wrong way. I like eating carrots, broccoli, and spinach. Now you're introducing a list, there's no question. But the problem here is that is not a complete sentence. It's a dependent clause. It's depending on what's coming next. And that's your rule. What is written before the colon must be a complete sentence for you to be able to use a colon. I think those are the same ones, yeah. I love to eat my favorite vegetables, broccoli, carrots, and spinach. So this, compared to this, is what matters here. This is a complete sentence. I like eating in a different context could be a complete sentence, but in this it's not. It's talking about these things. I like eating carrots would be the complete sentence. Here might be an easier example to visualize. Right. You're introducing a list of things, but this is not a complete sentence. Versus this, this is. So those are our 3 rules. I mean, you just got to put commas between your 3 items. If the items themselves have commas in them, you need to use semicolons to separate your primary items. And then if you're going to introduce a list of things, you got to use a colon. Right? So once you know those 3 things, these should be pretty easy. 3 of the biggest recorded earthquakes in California's history were. This is asking, should you put a colon there? And no, because this is not a complete sentence. You have the were there, right? The blank, and the blank. Yeah. Over the summer, Marshall read Natural Histories by Guadalupe Nettle. So that's item number 1. The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. What's to Become the Boy by Heinrich Boll. And The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. So this is just your list. Item 1, item 2, item 3. Now if we had a comma in here, in the item, then we would use a colon, or excuse me, a semicolon. But that's not the case. As of 2014, the dwarf planet Pluto has 5 known moons. And then it's a list afterwards. So all we have to do is ask ourselves, is this a complete sentence? Ask ourselves, is this a complete sentence? The dwarf planet Pluto has 5 known moons. Yeah, it's a complete sentence. I think some of the creepiest looking freshwater animals are. Now, would we do that? And the answer is no, because we have this are here. This is not a complete sentence. We leave it. Just like dogs, cats can be trained to shake hands, to beg, to walk on a leash, or to respond to vocal cues. We have item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, and none of them have a comma already in there, so just use commas. Let's see. 5 most populous cities in the world are located in Asia. Complete sentence before list. About 6,000 endangered snow leopards live in the wild, and the largest populations are found in China, Mongolia, India, and Kyrgyzstan. Found in. So that whole thing is not a complete sentence. So we're going to leave it blank. On our trip to Europe, we toured several historically famous cities, including Athens, Greece, Rome, Italy, and Vienna, Austria. It's our first semicolon example. Athens, Greece is item number 1. Rome, Italy is item number 2, and Vienna, Austria is item number 3. Now those items already have a comma being used. So in order to make this easier on our readers, Let's differentiate. Let's set them apart. Circadian rhythms are behavioral, mental, and physical changes. These are item 1, item 2, and item 3. No commas, so we use commas. Since the National Spelling Bee's inception in 1925, its winner has been determined by some rather unchallenging words. We're getting a list here. Those are our 3. And because this was a complete sentence, we use a colon. English speakers may know the tallest peak in the world is Mount Everest, but this iconic mountain is also known by other names. That is a complete sentence. Parasitic flowering plants like dwarf mistletoe, the Australian Christmas tree, and dodder. Okay, so those are lists of plants, and there are no commas already in there, so we just use commas. Several studies have documented the ill effects on sedentary lifestyle, and those are the ill effects, right? Greater risk of heart attack, obesity, high cholesterol, and premature death. So, but this is a complete sentence, so we're going to use a colon. After he retires, Mr. Moore wants to visit some of the most spectacular waterfalls in the world. It's a complete sentence. Chemoautotrophs are organisms that live on minerals dissolved in water, including nitrites, iron, and sulfur compounds. I'm hoping we're going to get a semicolon here before too long. When you go to Amsterdam, be sure to visit some of the city's most important cultural institutions. It's a complete sentence. It's giving a list. Your nose contains about 5 million scent receptors, but a dog's nose has an average of 125 million, which is why dogs are able to sniff out explosives, bedbugs, drugs, and disaster. Come on, semicolon. Vancouver, British Columbia aims to be the greenest city on the planet and is making strides by, and then it's listing, but because of this by, this is not a complete sentence. So we leave it. We might have time to finish this one. During their travels through Central Europe, Mr. and Mrs. Hartman visited Vienna, Austria. There we go. Visited Vienna, Austria. Item number 1. Budapest, Hungary. Item number 2. And Prague, Czech Republic. Item number 3. Because these items already have a comma inside of them, let's use a semicolon. Challenge zone. To save money on a new car, get approved for a loan if you need one. Well, that's a strange sentence. To save money on a new car, get approved for a loan if you need one before visiting dealers. Purchase at the year's end when dealers attempt to clear their lots of older inventory and investigate prices online. That's a cool sentence. So the first thing you should do to save money is to get approved for a loan if you need one before visiting dealers. The second thing you should do to save money on a new car is to purchase at year's end when dealers attempt to clear their lots of older inventory. The third thing you should do is to investigate prices online. And because this first thing has commas already in it, even though the others, I guess this one does too, but even though the third one doesn't have any commas, adding the semicolons will still help us out. Vera has been inspired by a number of great female tennis players. For appetizers, Paul served chipotle black bean cakes, a caprese salad with fresh mozzarella, tomato, and basil, pork belly sliders with pickled carrot, daikon, and cucumber, and goat cheese stuffed apricots. Now we're to semicolon territory. So Paul served that stuff, this stuff, this stuff. See, these are all our items, and these items have commas already there. So in order to make this clearer, we're going to use semicolons. All right, we're actually not going to have time to finish this, so I'll go back and recap. 3 rules. Rule number 1, use commas to separate your items in a list if you have 3 or more. Rule number 2, if you're separating items in a list, but those items themselves have a comma included, you got to use semicolons to make it clearer for your reader. Otherwise, you get some confusion. And rule number 3 is you use a colon to introduce a list only if the preceding phrase, the phrase that comes before the colon, is a complete sentence. Okay, I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, email me as always, and I will plan on seeing you in class. Thanks.